If you are on the methadone program, guess where you need to go every single day? Your clinic. You have to get your dose. If you don't get your dose, you lose your mind. Because guess what, when I talk about heroin or opiates without withdrawal, you get viciously sick. And ironically, the withdrawal symptoms for methadone are vastly worse than the withdrawal symptoms for heroin. It's actually a more dangerous drug to withdraw off of. So I have literally seen people lose their minds because they got to their clinic late and they were closed and they were missing their dose. And this particular gentleman was losing his mind because he was so afraid of the withdrawal symptoms of not being able to get his methadone. I guarantee that guy is going to score heroin. He is going to buy methadone. He's going to find some way of eliminating that sickness that he would feel if he didn't get his dose. So the view says that there is no, again, that view of methadone maintenance is that this person is always going to be. This is actually why I have heard methadone referred to in Harlem particularly as liquid handcuffs, because you are literally chained to your clinic for as long as you need your dose. So the guy that I talked to, for example, right, he told me he was frustrated because he couldn't get ahead. He couldn't get going in life because he's in a shelter and he's in a program. I didn't know the program until I asked him. It made perfect sense to me. I'm like, oh, well, now I completely understand your frustration because you're on a methadone program, which means that you physiologically are chained to go from your shelter to the program every day. So if you have imagine now trying to get a job where you have to explain to them that you can't be there at 9 o'clock because you have to go to your program and get your dose, and they close at 4. So you actually can't, you can't miss. You can't go on lunch break and go get your methadone. You're not going to get that job. Let's be real. So it's impossible to kind of get ahead when you're on the methadone program. It's really a frustrating situation. But again, the problem though is that so in his case, I'm like, oh man, so that explains a lot. To me, now doing the sort of the assessment, that tells me that I understand now what I'm working with. My next question for anyone who says I'm in the methadone program is, let me back up. The other issue with methadone is that you are not going to be able to get a person who is on methadone into any of the Christ-centered rehab programs in the country, as far as I know. I don't know of a single one that actually will take people into their program while simultaneously allowing them to go every day for their methadone dose. I'm praying that one exists somewhere, or that we can, that God will put it in the heart of someone to create it, because I believe that would be a huge help. I believe that would be a positive thing to have, at least that as an option, at a place where people could get methadone while simultaneously being discipled and getting job skills and stuff. Now, hopefully with the idea of weaning them down over the long term, because I know enough people who are now free of heroin to know that it doesn't necessarily, again, not one size fits all. Are there people out there who need to be neurologically attached to opiate for the rest of their lives chemically? I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit up here and say that's impossible, but I know enough people who have been freed from heroin addiction to know that it's also not universally true that they must have an opiate for the rest of their life. I don't think that their brains are now just forever damaged. I think there is a way. I think God can heal people. I think people can just be restored through different ways. So I'm not, again, I think both Christians sometimes and the secular world get stuck in this lie of sort of generalizations. It's all got to be housing first. We got to just house everyone, or we got to get everyone on methadone, or we got to get everyone saved, and then everything will be okay. Or so it just depends on your slant, but generalizations aren't all that helpful. So it's just, again, finding that niche for each person is really important. So my next question for the guy I'm talking to in Harlem is, well, what's your dose? And this is a common question you get. If someone tells you they're in the methadone program, you can say, well, what's your dose? What dose are you taking every day? This is an important question, because if you are at 30 milligrams or less, it is possible to do a straight detox from 30 to 0 over a 3 to 5 day period. Or 3 to 5, 3 to 7 days, depending on the situation. So if the person says, oh, I'm at 30 milligrams, which actually this person I was talking to in Harlem was, his answer, I asked him, well, what's your dose? I'm at 30 milligrams. All right, well, this opens up the floor a little bit. Now that you're at 30 milligrams or less, now you have some options to work with. Because they can go to a detox like Promesa, like ACI, like any one of these other programs that I talked about, and they can actually get a quick withdrawal from that methadone. here's the problem. Almost nobody is at that low of a dose. Almost everybody is at a 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 milligrams of methadone. So like in that situation, you're kind of stuck.
Don't allow me to sound too cynical, but do the clinics get payment from something like Medicaid for providing this methadone?
Yes. Yes.
So they have a reason to prescribe more than 30 milligrams? All right, I'm sounding cynical, I'm sorry.
No, it's, yeah. So anyway, so I'm talking to this guy. Now, here's the thinking behind it. And I'm far be it for me to be the person who defends the methadone programs in the clinics, but the problem behind it is that you have people who they go in, and I actually worked out with this guy. I asked him, I said, well, how many milligrams do you have? 30. Okay, great. Now let's go back to the situation for him. He said he was stuck. He was frustrated because he couldn't get a job, and I'm like, dude, no wonder you're stuck. You're at 30 milligrams. You're going to your clinic every day. Like, imagine if you were free. Imagine if you didn't have to go to your clinic every day. Imagine how much time. I mean, an hour on the train, waiting there at the clinic, finally getting your prescription bottle, finally getting your dose, and then it's like noon. And by that time, there's no way you can get a job. Like, imagine if you could wake up in the morning, not have to go to your clinic, and actually go right to a job. I mean, you might actually start to get ahead. So this is the scenario that I'm trying to paint for this gentleman. So I'm like, look, he needs his daily dose. He's traveling from Queens to Harlem. He can't get agency work. He wants to see his kids, but to make the appointment, he might lose time due to drugs or to homelessness. So like he's stuck, and now it makes perfect sense why. But he told me he's at 30 milligrams, so he could detox from 30 to 0. Now the question you guys have, the question I had in that moment, is this a wise thing to recommend to the person? Should I now say to this person, so, and again, a lot of Christians, God bless them, would automatically say, yes, of course, like get him off of methadone, he'll be free. Like everything I just said, it's all true. But here's the problem. He's on methadone for a reason. He's on methadone because he was using heroin. He's addicted to heroin. So we don't want to just assume that getting him off methadone will all of a sudden just like solve his problems and now he can get a job. But what happens if he gets off methadone and now instead of going to his job, he's going to his dealer instead of his clinic? Now you have another problem. So it's not like, again, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution in this situation because he went to the methadone clinic for a reason in the first place. We have to just consider that. The other thing is that the methadone, wow, brain just totally froze. So again, he could go to the methadone, but that's not necessarily the best. Might not be the best step for him. Well, that's the other what I was going to say. So because the question I asked for him was, well, you're at 30 milligrams. How are you doing at 30? It's an important question. How are you doing at 30? Right? How are your cravings? And he said, he's like, well, actually, I've had 2 dirty urines in the last month, and he failed the test because he's using in addition to his methadone, which the inevitable response to that from the clinic, understandably, as frustrating as it is, bump him up. So that's what they're going to do. Again, if methadone's is the maintenance program, and you're just trying to find a way to get this person sort of stabilized, then you're going to up his dose. So he said he was talking to his clinic about upping the dose. So that tells me that his addiction is still really, really strong. It tells me he's still actively using. And now I'm in a situation where it's like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want you to just detox 30 to 0 and then be back where you started. I have to be cognizant of that fact. So I want to go back to even again, this goes back to our objective too, right? Our objective is not just to get the person off the street. While that is the objective, as I mentioned, remember, this is literally life and death. We want to help people get off the street. We want to help them succeed. We want to help connect them to the next step that will help them become self-sustaining and, sustainable. I also, though, want to connect them to Jesus, because again, I believe as a follower of Christ that my connection from them to beyond just the superficial needs of housing, jobs and stuff, I also want to connect them to hope, the wholeness, the healing, etc. So now, I'm wondering, should I send them to a detox? My next question, do you have a support system? Do you have people around you who will walk with you, who will encourage you, who will help you through the process of being restored? And honestly, I already knew the answer before I asked it, but it's just it's a good question to ask. Do you have a support system? What is your support system? Because a huge factor in success for anyone breaking an addiction or other controlling issues is, guess what? Support system. Remember I mentioned people who go into their world of drugs and everything, and then they go out of it, and then they go right back into that same world, and they end up using it again. It's because they don't have that support system. They don't have people around them who are positive, who are uplifting. And not only that, but the other question I ask is, do you believe in God? Do you believe that God wants more for you? I mean, this is a fair question connected to, this is something that we as Christians don't need to be afraid to ask. Not in a sense of condescension, not in an attitude of saying I need to convert you at this moment. There's no expectation, there's no catch. It's just saying, listen, connected with your support system, do you believe in God? Because guess what? If you do believe in God, but you have no support system, now I'm not going to just try and get you into a rehab. Now I'm going to try and get you into a Christ-centered program. Because now this is a person who's in a situation where I don't want you to just detox off of methadone and then go back to the shelter where you're drowning. I want you to detox off methadone and consider going to a program where you will have a support system around you, where you can have people helping you, and you can do chapel every day, and you can be surrounded like a discipleship ministry, a discipleship rehab program is like a support system on steroids, ironically, because it really is like something where you can actually get holistic restoration. So one thing I asked him was, do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in God? Do you have a church community? Again, going back to support system. These are not random questions. You've been building up to this type of question from the very beginning. When the minute you started talking to the person, when I started talking to him about options and what his frustrations were, I was leading to this point. Because again, I believe in holistic restoration. I don't believe in just getting them into a shelter. I'm not just trying to just provide a social service. I'm trying to connect them to a resource, the ultimate resource, and I'm trying to get them there through the process that we're trying to walk them through. So like this, so we wrote this out. This is great. We can point people to Jesus, we can point people to a resource and trust Jesus will meet them along the way, or we can point them to Jesus and then walk them to the resource, right? So we want to make sure that we're actually not just a social service referring agency. We want to make sure that as followers of Christ, we are actually trying to connect them to the living God who will redeem them and transform them from the inside out. So when I met this guy, and I told him, I saw everything, he stays in the shelter, he's being pushed to get a job, he's on 30 milligrams of methadone, he needs a daily dose of drug, he can experience severe withdrawal symptoms, he wants to see his kids, he has no support system, he believes in God. There you go. So then I was like, well, what I recommended was, I was going to ask you, but there's not enough time. What I would do is, I actually said, this is the situation, would you consider, instead of going, I told him, I don't want you to go to detox and just go from 30 to 0 just for the sake of getting off of methadone. Because that will not help you. That will not set you up for success. If you're going 30 to 0, but now you're in a shelter, still in the same shelter, surrounded by the same people and the same struggles, you're not going to succeed. So what I want to do is have you consider taking 6 months of your life and dedicating it to God and actually setting it aside as a time to be reborn and trained on how to do life. How to get set up and equipped to deal with structure and being on time at work and all these things that you can gain from having a support, and then also having the support system around you. And honestly, this is a guy, I don't know if he ended up going to a program or not, but he was very receptive. And he was like, yes, that is definitely something I would consider. So I gave him my card, I gave him a referral, I gave him the information, I put it all in his hands, and I said, listen, if you want to go check it out, if you want to go to the program and visit and talk to their intake people, I will happily go with you. I'll happily make sure someone goes with you to kind of learn about the process, because again, it's a big commitment. I don't want this person to make this decision lightly. I want them to know what his options are, and especially if he has kids involved, which he does, I want to make sure that he is considering his whole person. And so that's sort of the process that we've taken to. I don't have time, obviously, to cover this, but this is a huge, huge, huge deal. I can't stress enough that if you can get people working, you will get people off the street. It's just a fact. So finding ways to connect people to jobs is really important. There are ways to do it. There are questions to ask. Stability. How will they get to their job? If this person's homeless and they can't, if you can't get to work, you're not going to get paid. It's kind of how it works. Skills. Do you have any specific training? What skills do you have? I mean, 98% of the people you ask in the street, what kind of job are you looking for? They're going to say maintenance or security. It's just what they're going to say. So then your next question is, well, what education level do you have? Well, I didn't finish high school. Well, what dreams do you have? Where do you want to be in life? Maybe you could try to think a bigger thought. Maybe maintenance and security isn't the top of the top for you. Maybe if you got your GED and then went to college and got a specific skill, got OSHA certified and got connected with a specific skill, you could actually get a job that pays more than minimum wage, and then you could actually start to build a life. So there's ways to go about doing that, but oftentimes the biggest deficit is not the ability or the willingness, it's just the dreaming. Too many people in the street don't have the capacity to dream anymore. And so helping them just sort of facilitate those dreams and say, well, if you could do anything in the world, if I was a genie in a bottle and you could have 3 wishes and all of them involved work, what would it be? And that's a good question to ask people, get people thinking, like, well, I used to want to be a doctor. Great, well, what happened with that? Or what about like a nurse's aide? Like, let's start somewhere. Let's start practically and move our way through. So in the Relief Bus, honestly, we have some great tools to get people connected to temp agencies, and different. We're part of a thing called a 10 tracker, which actually allows us to electronically refer people to job agencies that will assess, depending on their education level and skill set, what they can qualify for, what they can get trained in. So if you ever meet someone who's like, yeah, I just want to get work, I'm struggling right now, I can't find a job, you can refer them to the Relief Bus. I gave you guys all in the packet a referral, a blank referral, make copies of it and keep it. So like if you meet someone, you can just write a referral. You can even refer someone to the Relief Bus and like just write a note about the situation that's going on. So in terms of everything else, like I said, I mean, I know I threw a lot at you. I hope it was helpful. If you have questions along the way, or questions, or like you run into someone that you're not sure what to do or how to assess the situation, and you want help, or you want to go more deep and like going deeper into one of these, like I said, the New York State shelter system versus private shelters versus programs, detox, specific in terms of specific detoxes, drivers, people do pickups for detoxes depending on the situation. You may actually be able to get a driver to come and pick up someone that you're with, depending on their benefits. There's all kinds of things to be aware of as you go about your day engaging people. But the important thing is that you guys have the confidence to sort of triage the situation, ask the right questions, find out where the person is, and then connect them to the right resource. And then, like I said, most as importantly, but just as importantly, remember that you are a minister of the gospel. You're not just a referring agent. So you want to remember that this is about getting someone connected to Jesus, hope, and if you're not connecting them to a support system or to a church or to anywhere where they can actually be discipled, you are actually leaving them out to dry. You are failing them. If you do not connect them to Jesus in some way or connect them to a community, you are letting them down. And at the same time, if all you're doing is connecting them to Jesus and getting them to pray something, but you're not actually connecting them to discipleship and rehabilitation and shelter and physical needs, you are letting them down. You are failing them. So just try to find a way to kind of consolidate those two ideas. They're two sides of the same coin. All right? Awesome. There you go.